I am. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you
Thank you for
on the
having
podcast
me.
today. You're
Thank you, Jill.
welcome. So, tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, maybe what you're working on now, and kind of the steps you took to get there.
Sure. My name is ML Sanchez. That's how I broadcast myself to the world. I am a 30-year-old, very busy working mom of one whole teenager. So I have a 15-year-old son. I'm a busy wife. I have two fur babies, two little kitties named Callie and Tisha. And I, aside from working full time and in the corporate world, which everyone out there who works corporate jobs know how time consuming that is, I'm also pursuing a lot of personal endeavors. So it's very seldom I have time to kind of come up and breathe. So getting to talk to you today is exciting because
I
I don't talk to
know.
people much anymore.
I feel the same way. I feel like, especially when you're pursuing something kind of on the side or like entrepreneurial style, is very lonely in a sense because you're kind of, I mean, every waking moment you're pouring into it outside of, yeah, that 9 to 5 job. That's not always
Correct.
9 to 5.
Yeah, correct.
So what is your focus now? What's something that you're working on, passion project?
Several. My aspiration has always been to write, and potentially publish something, become a published writer. Obviously, one always dreams of being a successful writer and to be able to do that full time. But for now, the main part is my focus is in fiction, um, and just drawing from a lot of personal experience, some of it painful, some of it happy, hopefully some of it inspiring to readers. But this is something that is very vulnerable for me. So it's taken a lot of guts over the years. It's something I've wanted to pursue since I was in my early 20s, but never really got around to it. It always just felt like a dream. But this year has been very different. It's been one of achieving goals and kind of not letting the feelings and the emotions and the fear um a space anymore. It's been very transformative in that sense. I've been very bold in the things I've pursued this year. So I'm throwing writing in there. Well, while we're at it, let's keep this momentum and let's go. So that's my main one is to publish something in the next year. My next one is I'm also doing long form narration. So it's my first year jumping into voice acting, doing voiceover and learning everything that entails. And let me tell you, that's not easy. So I commend you on your podcasting journey because it's a lot. And I definitely understand all that you're learning right now and appreciate the effort that goes
Yeah.
into producing something like this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think especially like coming from such different backgrounds, like this, my background is not in anything digital or tech savvy, and it is like learning a new language. So it's really fun that we're kind of on similar paths this year. Would
Yeah.
you say, was there anything that like changed that made this year the year that you were like, I'm just gonna start doing, I'm not gonna like let it pass me by anymore? Was there any like pivotal moment, or was it just, tell me about that? Like, was there?
Ooh. So I personally speaking, although I have suffered loss from the pandemic, I lost two relatives during the pandemic due to COVID. Um, my transformational or my deaths, personal deaths were emotional, psychological in nature. The pandemic has been difficult on everybody, obviously, in one shape or form. But for me, I've embarked on a journey of not only reanalyzing life in a spiritual sense, a psychological sense, understanding that there was a need for therapy, understanding that once the world stops, you're left with your own thoughts, and trauma was there, and I had to work through that.
Mm,
Um, and then also realizing that part of what I've never been content with, as grateful as I am to be employed, have a job, and provide an income for my family, I've just never been content in my career. And that's because I feel like I've always been operating out of what I've always wanted to do. And so I feel like it was a buildup, right? It was a buildup of all of that and just realizing I I'm tired of focusing energy and attention on things that I don't enjoy. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one that will back down from hard work, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ignorant to the fact that there's a lot of work in this involved, but man, if I'm putting that work into something I'm loving, it doesn't feel like work anymore, right? It feels like you're doing some, what is it? What's the saying? Punishment, or sorry, work without purpose is punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels
Mm-hmm.
like. And so that's kind of why over the last year from, yeah, 2021, it was really of, you're either going to try this and you're going to fail, and that's okay because we could try again, right? That's the flip side.
Right.
Is what if I fail? Well, then I try again, or I don't try, which I think is the true failure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
a whole
Yeah.
year, a whole
A
year
whole
was the
year.
moment. Yeah.
No, I mean, I would say that I have similar story. I actually lost my job in the pandemic and was pregnant with my second child, Esme. And at that point, I wanted to start a blog. And I bought the blog, I started it, and then I kind of just, it wasn't the right time, it wasn't the right message. And it took 2 years till 2022 till I really kind of like found my voice or what I really wanted to get out to the world. And kind of like you, I mean, there were definitely things that we lost during the pandemic. You kind of start to reevaluate what's important to you and what matters. And I have never had a job that I didn't love. Like I've loved all my jobs. I've been a physical therapist, and now I'm working from home. But like, I can definitely tell that now I've kind of started into these endeavors. Like I crave it. Like I want that time. And now my job is like work. But I know it's funding my passion projects. Like
Correct.
my job is funding these experiences that I want to have. And like you said, if you don't try, I mean, that's almost worse. I mean, than failure, right? You'd rather try and fail than never know. So
Yeah.
I wanted to speak back to you kind of talked about starting therapy and working through some things and how that might be impacting your writing. And I just wanted to commend you too on that, because that's work in itself. Therapy is hard. I started my therapy journey in December, finally sticking with a therapist and going to counseling because I just needed that outlet and I needed that time for personal development and kind of digging deep into what makes me and what shaped me into who I am today. So I also just want to commend you for that, because I know that that's not fun all the time, but what can come out of it is just can be so amazing and beautiful. So
Thank you. You're right. It's not easy. And for people who may be considering it, but afraid of potentially feeling judged or just not wanting to open up, those feelings don't necessarily ever go away. It's always going to be uncomfortable bearing those raw wounds, right? Or
mm-hmm,
going there to subject matters that you don't really want to. And not all therapists are created equal. And so I think that that would be my word of encouragement for anybody who
mm-hmm.
wants to seek out therapies. That one therapist may not have worked, but that doesn't mean you can't find somebody else. Therapists are literally like, I hate to say it this way, but it's like it's a different flavor for everybody, right?
There
Somebody,
is.
so just kind of seek out and just test the waters and find a therapist that you feel comfortable with, because I feel like that makes a difference.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, that's good advice. Can you tell me a little bit about your writing? Like, what is your target audience?
Hmm. Yes, I can tell you what my target audience is. Anybody who's that's a great question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the one story that I'm working on now, it's obviously fiction. I don't feel like the story would be told correctly if I told it as a nonfiction, but a lot of my life experiences is poured into that book and into that character. And that character has gone through a lot. She's suffered abuse. She's been an abuser. Uh she's done a lot, and a lot of it is rooted in a lot of unforgiveness that she didn't realize was still
Mm,
there. So maybe the target audience is anybody who's willing to hear a story of forgiveness.
mhm.
Ironically, the title of the book is Unforgiven. First time I've said that out loud. The title of the
Ah,
book is Unforgiven, but
I
it's
love it,
centered
Em.
around forgiveness. Yeah.
Mhm,
So um it's really anybody who wants to hear a story about forgiveness
mhm.
and understanding that forgiveness is very nuanced, and it's an ongoing process, and it doesn't necessarily always look like, okay, I forgive you, I can move on. That's very unrealistic.
Wow.
And I feel like we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves to say, why am I still dealing with this pain or
Mm,
the remnants of this trauma if I've forgiven this person? Well,
right.
I think that's the wrong question to ask yourself, because nobody said that forgiveness is like the flip of a switch, right? It doesn't,
Mhm.
we wish, but it doesn't work that way. So the way I tell that story is coming from a fictional sense, you know, but a lot of my heart is in there. So
I love that.
I
I
don't know. I don't know if
think,
that answered your question.
no, it did. It really did. I think, that the way we perceive forgiveness is kind of a preschool way of thinking about it, right? And I just think about my girls. So I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And, when I talk about forgiving or saying sorry, it really is kind of that flip of the switch,
Yeah.
because their emotions aren't really hurt. They forget about it within 2 seconds. But it's never really explained to us as adults. Like, you're right, the pain does stay, and there are times where you're at, like, a mental block trying to still get past something where you're like, "I thought I forgave this situation. I thought I was over this situation, but it's still here." Um, Now you have a teenage son,
Hmm.
and I'm just thinking about, like, I'm not there yet. So, as far as, like, teaching your kids something like that, like, obviously, this book would be beneficial. How do you feel that you maybe are able to show him what this is like, this concept?
That's a very good question. So I got very lucky with my son. Um, he's he's very much like me. He's a good listener. I don't
Mm,
say he's not very much like me because he's a good listener, but he likes listening to other people's stories, and I like listening to other people's stories. And because of that, I think he's not too quick to act on
mm,
things. He likes to think before he speaks because he understands the importance of what comes out of your mouth, how you say things, how even if you may not mean to say something or do something that can hurt somebody, it can still hurt them.
mhm,
And so I feel like I've helped build a very introspective young man. And he has seen through my journey because he's been with me since I was a child. I had my son at 15 years old. I got
mm.
pregnant with him at 14 years old. I had him at 15, and now he's my age, and I could not fathom my child procreating and
Having a
having a
child.
child of his own, right?
Yeah.
And so because he's lived a lot, I feel like I've led through example in this regard.
Mm,
He has seen me go through the stages of forgiveness.
mm,
He saw me struggle with my first marriage to his father.
mm.
Um, a lot of pain and a lot of trauma came out of that relationship. Not all of it was bad, but a lot of things that helped shape who I am now required me forgiving. And that was an
Yeah.
ongoing process. So I feel like I've instilled in him the importance of understanding that forgiveness is a process and sometimes it's a long process,
Mm.
just by example, because he's kind of been along the journey with me.
Right.
Makes
He's
sense.
kind of experienced it firsthand, secondhand, firsthand,
Yeah.
and learned with you,
Firsthand in some ways, right?
firsthand in some ways. I think that's really beautiful though, because I just feel that, like, so many times we want to hide those areas of our lives, especially from our children, or protect them in such a way. And like, yes, there's a time and a place, but at the same time, like keep going back to, my girls are very young, but like I'm very like, I want them to make decisions and know that their decisions have consequences. And a lot of that is in Josh and I's interaction in front of them. And,
Right.
you know, making sure that if we do have an argument, it's in front of them and then we reconcile in front of them. And I think so much of that is hidden into where like they don't know that that's okay to have a fight, or, you know, quote unquote fight, you know, but
Right.
and how to work through it. I mean, really how to work through it. So I think, you know, even though that was not the best experience for you to go through, or for him maybe, but how much you guys have grown out of it and how relatable that is. I mean, how many
Yeah.
people do you know that have a similar story? I think you could really impact a lot of people with that story for sure. That's cool.
Let it be so. Well,
Let it be so.
that's what we're aiming for. Yeah.
Okay, so here's another tough question for you. If you could, where you're at now, speak to your 15-year-old self,
Mm.
what encouragement would you give her, or what would you say to her? Maybe not you, even yourself, but someone in your situation.
Yeah. So I actually have spoken more to my 5-year-old self and my 10-year-old self
Mhm. Mhm.
than I have my 15-year-old self. And I think it's because in some ways I still feel like my 15-year-old self. I'll
Mm.
explain. So when I turned 15 and a human being came out of me, it felt like the flip. I think I felt like the switch flipped immediately. I was
Mm.
instantly no longer thinking on behalf of myself. It was always this cohesive, I've got a child to raise, I've got school, I've got to work, I have to become an adult now.
Yeah.
There's no grown up time. There's no, I'm sorry, there's no lead up time to growing up, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So from the time I was 15 until now, I've spent my time in autopilot, just doing,
Mm.
being, right? I spoke to my inner child a lot because, and this is part of this therapy process, right? As understanding that a lot of my feelings of self-worth failed to recognize that all of this innocence that I used to have, this wonder for life that I used to have as a little child just seems so jaded as an adult sometimes, especially when we're going through hard times. Like it just feels like, what is adult life if not suffering?
Right.
That's being dramatic, but that's what it feels like sometimes.
It's
The
true.
stresses of life kind of weigh on you. But my 15-year-old self, what I would say today is that you don't need anybody. You don't need anybody to tell you how worthy you are of yourself.
Mm.
Because I feel like if I had her sitting in front of me, I would say a lot of what you sought out at that age was love. You wanted to
Mm.
feel loved, failing to recognize that you just needed to love yourself and understand that you are just so beautiful inside and out. And you don't need anybody to validate that.
Wow.
And then I struggled with that too. The flip side to that, though, Jill, is I'm so grateful for her because
Mm.
she acted out of love. And yes, she made mistakes. And yes, those mistakes led up to consequences, but those consequences just got accepted into a soccer academy.
Woo!
So he's my biggest blessing. He's my
Yeah.
biggest blessing. So it's a catch, right? There's a catch to
Yeah.
it. So I'm
Yeah.
just, I just wish she would have known that if she had learned to love and appreciate herself, she wouldn't have sought that out so much. And life could have been very
Mhm.
different, but also no
Yeah.
complaints. I'm still proud of you.
Right, right. I feel like too,
Yeah.
you know, you kind of talked about that sense of adventure that you had as a child, or that wonder. And I feel like that's coming back, you know, like in like kind of
Yes.
what you said, that taking back this year, you're doing it. I mean, maybe that joy or that
Yes.
fervor for life has like kind of reignited in you. And that's really fun to see.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you.
okay. I took a poll on Instagram asking people what they feel is the most important message to teach their children or to share with their children. And a resounding number of people said kindness, just kindness in the world. Like that is what's lacking. That's what we just need to teach our children. So I thought it was really beautiful what you wrote on the podcast questionnaire about what it means to you to be living in your legacy. I didn't know if you wouldn't mind if I just shared the snippet of what you wrote,
Yeah,
because I just think
sure.
it's such a sweet thing and like speaks just the of your soul, like your heart for people. So you wrote, whatever I do, I hope it helps dry the tears of the world. I pray that every step of the way I can be a good friend, a source of encouragement or comfort, or at the very least a smile that helps someone along their way. And I just thought that was so sweet. Oh my gosh, I just love that so much.
Thank
um
you.
you're welcome. I have another question for you. Um, are there any ways or resources that you plug into to stay motivated or positive?
So for me, it was a waterfall effect. I realized that going back to the 15-year-old conversation, I realized that I was always seeking somebody else to tell me
Mm,
that I had something in me, or that, hey, am I crazy or do you think I would be good at this? There's nothing wrong with asking people for advice or input, but it's tricky when it turns into a habit, right? We're always looking for somebody to be like, yeah, you've got what it takes, do it. Do you
mhm.
think you have what it takes? And once I sorted out all of the psychological mess going on, right? Which there's nothing wrong. We all have a little bit of
Yes.
psychological mess,
Oh,
and that's
yes.
okay. Okay.
I
Yes. I
love
just want
that.
to say that for the record. It's okay. Once I sorted that out, I was like, okay, what am I what am I trying to do? And what's the worst that can happen if I fail? And when I realized that the worst that could happen when I fail is that I could try again, I was like, well, that's not so bad. So
Mhm.
now let me plug into studying it. What can I do to plug into the technical aspect of it? And this is something that I learned from my coach, because when I decided to enter into voice acting, although you can do it on your own 100%, life is a lot easier if you're getting some expert coaching in that regard. I remember telling her one day, I showed up to my online session with her where we have a coaching session, and she's like, okay, what do you want to learn? And I said, well, let me go over what I have learned, because I did a deep dive into everything I needed to have: equipment, software, engineering, acting, where to seek work, all of these things. And she said, okay, well, it sounds like you know everything you need to know. So when are we going to start? And she kind of left me speechless for a second, because I was so busy trying to learn the craft.
Mm,
I was now ready for it, and I didn't really know how to handle that. And so I told her, I'm afraid.
mhm.
And I wasn't ready for you to tell me that I'm ready. I was ready for you to tell me that I needed more.
Right.
And she said, well, if you're waiting for the feeling of fear to go away, it's never going to happen.
Mm,
My coach, I love her dearly. She's been in this industry for 2 decades. And she said, I still get nervous every time a new
mhm.
opportunity comes up. And I've been
Mhm.
doing this for a long time. So if you're waiting for fear to subside, it won't.
Yeah.
Focus on your on your technique. Focus on what's going to take the steps in a fashion that allows your technique to improve. That way, when the fear kind of starts settling in, you revert to your technique. So, for example, if I'm scared because I've got a project that requires accents or requires different character voices and I'm afraid I can't deliver, let the feeling flow and then
Mm,
start with your technique. What am I going to do? Start researching those accents, start practicing in the mirror,
yeah.
doing vocal warm-ups, doing whatever I need to do to kind of let the fear fade away and then just go for it. You have to fight through it. So, um, did I answer your question? Those are the
Yeah.
resources. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I think, I mean, so similar situation. I have a podcast coach.
Mhm.
Again, it's just wise. They've been there before, they've done it, and it's really nice to learn firsthand, from their experiences. And a lot of what we talk about is that fear, because it can present in so many different ways. And most of the time, it is creating a problem to slow down your progress, right?
Yep.
So, but I don't have a podcasting mic, but I don't have a office, but I don't have, and we kind of create these issues so that you don't have to fail really because you don't even start.
Right.
But we talk about that a lot. And I do feel like that is something that's super important to be aware of and is hard to be aware of because we still think there's an issue. But wait, I need more information. Just like you said,
Right.
I'm a perpetual student. I love to learn.
Mhm.
I don't have it all yet. I need it all together before I start. And I think it's just taking those steps. And that's, I think, applicable to anything in life, you know,
Right.
this college or this college, these decisions that feel like it's the weight of the world on you. But until you just start walking towards one of them, you're going to know, you
Right.
know. And I think that's one of the guests we had on one of our podcast classes talked about fear being a tiger, an uncaged tiger. And the tiger never goes away. You just have to learn to walk alongside the tiger because
Yeah.
it's always going to be there, just like you said. You,
That's right.
it doesn't get better. I mean, maybe sometimes it gets better, but it's going to be there
Right.
regardless. So
Okay.
M, with all these new ventures,
Mhm.
where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
5 years, my goal is to be fully autonomous.
Mm,
And I mean that in all aspects. I dream of seeing myself owning my own business and letting that business take me to new adventures, adventures that will fund my lifestyle. So where I don't have to split my time between responsibility and passion. It can just be intertwined. But I have the autonomy to dictate when it starts and when it stops. Because one thing I've realized since being 15 and being an autopilot is that you need to take time to rest. You need to
mm,
take time to savor this. 15 years pass by so quickly. And I'm
mhm.
staring at my man child now, and I
Right.
love him so much, but I sometimes mom, please stop. Cause I am that really weird mom that gets teary eyed when I'm looking at him randomly because I feel like I was there the whole time, but I was also on autopilot. So I feel like there are a
Mhm,
lot of things that I missed. So I'm doing my
mhm,
best to make his teenage years about him without
mhm,
suffocating him, of course. Um, but then also making sure that I'm preparing because I will eventually, I'm really close on this, my empty nest phase, right? That's quickly approaching me. And so I want to be autonomous so I can get ready to explore this world and
mm.
write about it, maybe.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so amazing. Oh my gosh. I can't wait because I feel like let's do this. Like you just get me so pumped up. I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's see.
It's
I'm gonna keep you on. You're gonna be recurring
yeah,
because we'll
you
check
got
in
it.
and see kind of like where you're at because I just love that journey. And I feel like that's a dream of a lot of women, that maybe
Yeah,
after they have kids and they realize, I don't want to live like I did anymore. Life is
right.
different. There's precious moments that I don't want to miss anymore. It's not worth the extra hours at work. It's not worth I want to create something for myself. I want to create something meaningful. So
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, we are getting close to our closing. I wanted to thank you, Em, so much for being on the show. Thank you for showing up today, for being authentically you. The most costly thing that you can do is be real. and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.